The Senate is considering repealing the Federal Defense of Marriage Act. We'll talk about it today on Faith and Freedom. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Matt Barber, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. Matt, Liberty Counsel Action has decided to score the vote of the senators with regards to a first round, which is at the committee level, of a bill that's called S-598. That particular bill would repeal the Federal Defense of Marriage Act that was passed by Congress, overwhelmingly bipartisan Congress, in 1996 and signed into law by President Bill Clinton himself. And that law says, for purposes of federal law, marriage is defined as the union of one man and one woman. So in terms of federal benefits and so forth, spouse means a spouse in a marriage between one man and one woman. And it also says in another section of it that one state does not have to recognize another state's same-sex marriage. One state cannot be forced to recognize another state's same-sex marriage. But this particular law now would ultimately repeal the Federal Defense of Marriage Act. And that's a law that obviously we support at Liberty Counsel and Liberty Counsel Action.
Yeah, and it's repulsively referred to as the Respect for Marriage Act, which is completely the opposite of what it is. It's the Disrespect for Marriage Act. And as we head careening toward an Obama depression, how dare these senators take time out of working toward creating jobs, to engage in this radical social engineering to radically redefine the age-old institution and definition of marriage. It's really reprehensible that they're doing this. They're going to be held accountable for it, and I think the American people are going to reject this San Francisco-style social engineering coming out of Washington, D.C.
Well, for more information, you can go to call Liberty Counsel 1-800-671-1776 or Liberty Counsel Action 877-810-1776. That's 877-810-1776. Liberty Counsel Action is scoring the vote, and that means that we will make sure that you know how these individuals voted. In fact, we also have a scorecard already for this year on certain significant votes. If you want to find out how members of Congress in the House and the Senate voted on important issues that affect our family, faith, and freedom and our liberty, you can ask for that scorecard by calling 877-810-1776 or 800-671-1776. We can put you in touch with that scorecard. But at any rate here, this particular bill, the so-called Respect for Marriage Act, says this, quote, "For the purposes of any federal law in which marital status is a factor, an individual shall be considered married if that individual's marriage is valid in the state where the marriage was entered into, or in the case of a marriage entered into outside of any state, if the marriage is valid in the place where entered into and the marriage could have been entered into in a state." I know there's a lot of entered intos in here, but the bottom line is, for purposes of any federal law, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, any other kinds of pension benefits, etc., they're essentially proposing that the federal law recognize same-sex marriage. If someone is from Massachusetts and they have a same-sex marriage, or somebody is from Canada and they have a same-sex marriage, then the federal law is going to recognize it as the equivalent of marriage between a man and a woman.
And let's not forget, Matt, that in 1996, DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support and was signed into law by liberal Democratic President Bill Clinton. So how we now have all of these senators putting their finger to the wind and kowtowing to the radical homosexual activist lobby, it really shows that they have no backbone, A, and B, that they're just willing to go wherever the political winds take them. It's a shame. But, you know, there was a reason that DOMA was put into law, and a big part of it is yes, to protect the institution of marriage, but it's also to protect children, Matt. And you know, the natural marriage between a man and a woman is the gold standard. We know that's where kids thrive, in that environment. We even have lesbian activists now coming out, and some of them admitting that this is where kids are best served served with a mother and a father. And a 2010 Kansas State University study, a comprehensive study, showed that children who are raised in a lesbian or gay household are more than 8 times more likely to engage in the homosexual lifestyle themselves. And that's terrible when you consider that the CDC has found that 1 out of 5 adolescent and men engaged in the homosexual lifestyle are HIV positive. 40% of them don't even know it. So people say, well, there's no reason to have the Defense of Marriage Act. Those are just a few reasons right there.
And if you go back to early American history, when you look at the territories when they were becoming states, back then the issue was polygamy, but it's the same essential issue, not recognizing marriage as the foundational building block between one man and one woman. And in that particular situation, if a territory wanted to become a state, they had to disassociate from polygamy, ban polygamy, and recognize marriage as a union of only one man and one woman in order to become a state. It wasn't just Utah. It was New Mexico and some of the other states. It was about 5 to 6 or 7 states that actually had in the enabling legislation to become admitted to the state. They had to ultimately affirm marriage as one man and one woman and disassociate and ban polygamy. The reason for that is we understood that if we're bringing another state or a territory into the union in order to protect the liberty and the basic moral foundation and family structure, which gives the first form of government for all the other states, we had to be on the same page. You couldn't have one state with polygamy and another state without polygamy, and polygamy was harmful to the ultimate family structure. It's the same thing here. You can't have one state that just simply forces another state to have same-sex marriage. And frankly, I don't think you can have a patchwork either. I don't think a patchwork works where you have one state experimenting with same-sex marriage and another state not, any more than you have one state experimenting with polygamy and another state not. The bottom line is when you ultimately mess with that fundamental family structure, marriage between a man and a woman, it has negative effects on the family, negative effects on children, and that has a ripple effect with regards to every discernible social structure that we ultimately encounter.
Well, and a repeal for DOMA would remove the barrier. It opens the floodgates, would essentially do away, ultimately, with all of the state amendments protecting marriage. Those states who recognize the reality, the legitimacy of natural marriage and have rejected the silly and oxymoronic notion of so-called same-sex marriage, something that is just simply not in keeping with reality. It just isn't. Those states would be forced then to pretend to join in on this delusion that a man can marry a man somehow, or that a woman can marry a woman, and that actually is marriage. And that states that find that unconscionable, a repeal of DOMA would force them, states like Virginia, Mississippi, Oklahoma, other states that have more of a conservative bent would be forced to adopt the radical redefinition of marriage from states like Vermont or Massachusetts.
That's right. I mean, if you ultimately repeal DOMA, so it's not just doing what this Respect for Marriage Act does, where it simply says, well, for federal
it's an incrementalist
purposes,
approach.
You can recognize marriage if another state has same-sex marriage. It literally would allow one state, like Massachusetts, to force the other states to recognize its same-sex marriage law.
Right.
And you have 30-some states, and then you have up to 45 states with constitutional amendments and statutes that say marriage is only the union between a man and a woman. All of those would be placed at risk if DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, is repealed.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the so-called Respect for Marriage Act is a big step toward the repeal of DOMA, and then you have President Obama and the Holder Justice Department and the Obama administration essentially refusing now to do their duty and defend a newly passed law.
It's not a big step. It is a repeal of DOMA.
Yeah.
It takes DOMA away. So the floodgates ultimately are open as a result.
Right.
Give us a call at Liberty Counsel. I believe that the issue of marriage and family is critically and fundamental to our liberty and to the family and to our government. That's why I wrote the book called Same-Sex Marriage, Putting Every Household at Risk. That's the book, Same-Sex Marriage, Putting Every Household at Risk. You can give us a call and order that book now. And you can also order Dr. Judith Reisman's book, Sexual Sabotage. That's Dr. Reisman's book, Sexual Sabotage, a powerful read. By the way, we'll have Dr. Reisman on the air in a couple of weeks. She's actually at the Vatican right now. And from there, she is going to London, where she's speaking around the world regarding Alfred Kinsey and the effects on America and the world with regards to his fraudulent and essentially criminal research.
Yes.
Give us a call at Liberty Counsel, 1-800-671-1776. You can support us by going to the website lc.org and make an online credit card contribution right there on the website. You can also get the Liberty Alert email and the Liberator newsletter.